The champagne flute shattered against the polished floor, its crash slicing through the murmurs of the wedding guests. Julian Carter stood frozen, his heart hammering, as his sister Clara's voice rang out, sharp and venomous. "You think you can just flaunt this in front of everyone? Julian, you're ruining my day." The coastal Maine breeze carried the sting of her words across the lavish outdoor venue, where fairy lights swayed and the Atlantic Ocean churned restlessly beyond the cliffs. Julian's hand tightened around Ezra's, his partner of 3 years, whose warm, calloused fingers grounded him against the rising tide of humiliation. Ezra, ever the artist with his paint-streaked jeans swapped for a sharp blazer, whispered, "You don't owe them anything, Jules." But the weight of Clara's glare, the disapproving stares from relatives, and the suffocating silence of the crowd pressed down like a storm cloud. Julian had bankrolled this entire wedding every cent of the $150. 000 venue, catering, and flowers, yet here he was, shamed for daring to love openly. He wasn't supposed to be the villain today. Growing up in the small, conservative town of Bar Harbor, Julian had clawed his way out of judgment and whispers to build a tech empire in Boston. At 29, he was the youngest self-made millionaire in Maine, his app revolutionizing mental health support for marginalized communities. He'd funded Clara's dream wedding out of love, not obligation, wiring payments for her vision of a perfect day, a cliffside ceremony at the historic seaside manor, complete with a string quartet and a custom ice sculpture. But now, as Clara's fiancé, Derek, smirked from the altar and her maid of honor hissed, "This is why we didn't want him here," Julian felt the old wounds of rejection reopen. "Clara," Julian said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest, "I'm here because you're my sister. I brought Ezra because he's my family." The word family hung in the air, fragile but defiant. Clara's face twisted, her white gown glowing under the setting sun as she snapped, "You're embarrassing us. You always have to make everything about you." The guests' distant cousins, childhood neighbors, and Clara's sorority sisters shifted uncomfortably, some nodding in agreement, others averting their eyes. Ezra stepped forward, his hazel eyes flashing. "You don't get to talk to him like that. Not after everything he's done for you." His voice was low, but it carried the weight of someone who'd faced rejection before and refused to bow. Ezra had grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes in rural Vermont until he found solace in his art. His paintings, vivid and raw, had caught Julian's eye at a Boston gallery 2 years ago, sparking a love that felt like coming home. Now, standing beside Julian, Ezra was a quiet force, his presence a reminder that love could be a shield. Clara's eyes narrowed. "Done for me. He's just throwing his money around to feel superior. This is my wedding, not your pride parade." The crowd gasped, a few chuckles breaking the tension. Julian's throat tightened. He'd spent months coordinating with vendors, ensuring every detail was perfect for Clara, who'd always dreamed of a fairy tale wedding. He'd paid for the silk tablecloths, the imported orchids, even the custom-engraved champagne flutes, the one now in pieces at his feet. And yet, here he was, reduced to a spectacle. "Enough," Julian said, his voice cutting through the noise. He turned to Ezra, his anchor in the chaos. "Let's go." But as they moved toward the exit, Clara's voice chased them. "Good. Leave. You're not welcome here anyway." The words landed like a punch, and Julian's steps faltered. He'd always been the one to fix things, family fights, financial woes, even Clara's impulsive decisions. But this was a betrayal he hadn't seen coming. As they reached the gravel path leading to their car, Ezra squeezed his hand. "You don't deserve this, Jules." "None of it." Julian nodded, but his mind was already racing. He'd spent years building bridges with his family, believing love could outweigh prejudice. But Clara's words had severed something deep. And then, in the quiet of the parking lot, an idea sparked a decision that would shift the tide. Julian pulled out his phone, his fingers steady as he opened his banking app. Every vendor, every deposit, every contract for this wedding was tied to his accounts. He'd been the silent benefactor, never asking for thanks. But now, he was done. With a few taps, he began drafting emails to the caterer, the florist, the venue manager. Cancel all payments. Effective immediately. He wasn't just leaving the wedding, was pulling the foundation out from under it. Back at the venue, Clara laughed with her bridesmaids, unaware that the ground was about to shift. The string quartet played on. The ice sculpture glistened, and the guests sipped their drinks, oblivious to the storm brewing. Julian's heart pounded, not with guilt, but with a strange, liberating clarity. He'd spent his life trying to prove his worth to a family that refused to see him. No more. Ezra watched him, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You sure about this?" he asked, his voice soft but proud. Julian met his gaze, the weight of the moment settling into resolve. "I've never been more sure." The next hour unfolded like a slow-motion disaster. The caterer approached Clara mid-toast, his face pale. "I'm sorry, Ms. Carter, but the payment for the reception has been reversed. We can't serve unless it's settled." Clara's smile froze, her eyes darting to Derek, who looked equally confused. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as the florist followed. Then the venue manager, each delivering the same news. The funding was gone. The wedding, Clara's perfect, Pinterest board dream, was unraveling. Julian and Ezra were already halfway to their cabin in Acadia National Park, the ocean breeze replaced by the hum of their car. Julian's phone buzzed with furious texts from Clara. "What did you do? You're ruining my life." He didn't respond. Instead, he reached for Ezra's hand, the warmth of it steadying him. "I thought I needed them to accept me," Julian said quietly. "But I don't. Not anymore." Ezra's smile was soft, his voice a balm. "You've got me. And you've got you. That's enough." But the story wasn't over. Clara's wedding was only the beginning of a reckoning, one that would force her to confront her own prejudice, and Julian to redefine what family meant. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fire and regret, Julian felt something new: freedom. The cabin smelled of pine and salt, a sanctuary tucked among the granite peaks of Acadia. Julian sat on the porch, staring at the stars emerging over Cadillac Mountain, his phone silent now after he'd turned it off. Ezra was inside, sketching by the fire, his pencil scratching softly against Pap-era portrait of Julian. He'd said, though Julian hadn't seen it yet. The quiet was a stark contrast to the chaos of the wedding, but Julian's mind was far from calm. He'd pulled the plug on Clara's day, but the weight of it lingered. Was he the villain now, or had he finally claimed the respect he'd been denied? Back at Seaside Manor, panic had set in. Clara stood in the center of the reception tent, her veil askew, as guests whispered and the staff scrambled. The caterer had packed up half the food. The florist was removing centerpieces, and the venue manager was threatening to shut down the event entirely. "This is a mistake," Clara insisted, her voice shrill. "My brother paid for everything. Call him." But Julian wasn't answering, and Derek, usually so composed, was red-faced, arguing with the bartender over unpaid tabs. The guests, sensing the collapse, began slipping away, their murmurs of what happened trailing into the night. Clara's best friend, Madison, pulled her aside. "Did you know Julian was paying for all this?" she asked, her eyes wide. Clara froze. She hadn't thought about it, not really. Julian had always been the one to fix things, to swoop in with his money and his quiet competence. She'd assumed it was his way of making up for being different. "He never said anything," Clara muttered, but the truth gnawed at her. She'd taken his generosity for granted, and now her perfect day was crumbling. Miles away, Julian sipped coffee, the bitterness mirroring his thoughts. He'd grown up idolizing Clara, his older sister by 5 years, who'd once braided his hair as a joke and taught him to ride a bike. But as he came out at 16, her warmth had cooled. She'd never said the words, "I don't accept you," but her distance spoke louder. Family gatherings became battlegrounds of passive-aggressive jabs, and when she'd asked him to fund her wedding, felt like a chance to mend things. He'd poured his heart into it, believing it could bridge the gap. Now, he saw the truth. Clara had used him. Ezra stepped onto the porch, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. "You okay?" he asked, settling beside Julian. His presence was a quiet strength, a reminder of the life they'd built together, a life where Julian didn't have to hide. "I keep thinking about her face," Julian admitted. "She looked so betrayed. Like I'm the one who broke us." Ezra's hand found his. "She broke this, Jules. Not you. You gave her everything, and she threw it back in your face." He paused, his voice softening. "But you don't have to carry her choices. You've got a heart bigger than this whole damn state. Don't let her shrink it." Julian leaned into him, the warmth of Ezra's shoulder grounding him. He thought of the wedding, the months of planning, the late-night calls with vendors to ensure Clara's vision came to life. He'd done it for love, but also for approval, a need he hadn't admitted until now. "I wanted her to see me," he said quietly. "Not just the money, but me. Who I am." Ezra's eyes softened. "She doesn't deserve you. But you know who does. The people you help every day. Your app, your work, it's saving lives. That's your family now." Julian's app, Haven, was more than a tech success. It connected queer youth with mental health resources, offering chat lines, therapy access, and safe spaces. He'd built it from his own pain, from the nights he'd spent as a teenager wondering if he'd ever belong. The app had reached millions, but Clara had never asked about it. She'd never cared. The next morning, Julian woke to a voicemail from his mother, Ellen. Her voice was strained, caught between anger and desperation. "Julian, what have you done? Clara's devastated. You can't just destroy her wedding like this. Call me." He didn't. Instead, he and Ezra hiked to Jordan Pond, the autumn leaves blazing red and gold. As they sat by the water, Ezra pulled out his sketchbook, revealing the portrait Julian, his face lit with determination, the ocean behind him like a promise of freedom. "This is how I see you," Ezra said. "Not the guy they shamed. This guy." Julian's throat tightened. For the first time in years, he felt seen not as the rich brother, the gay outcast, or the family fixer, but as himself. But the peace was short-lived. His phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Derek, "You're a selfish prick. Fix this, or I'll make sure everyone knows what you did." The threat stung, but it also clarified something. Derek, with his polished charm and old-money arrogance, had always tolerated Julian's presence with a thin smile. Now, the mask was off. "I'm not fixing anything," Julian said aloud, surprising himself. Ezra raised an eyebrow. "You sure? They're going to come for you hard." "Let them," Julian replied, his voice steady. "I'm done playing their game." Back in Bar Harbor, Clara sat in her hotel room, the remnants of her wedding dress crumpled on the floor. The reception had ended in chaos, with guests leaving in droves and vendors refusing to continue without payment. Derek paced, his phone pressed to his ear as he tried to salvage the situation. But no one was budging. Clara's tears had dried, replaced by a burning anger. "How could he do this to me?" she whispered, but the question felt hollow. Deep down, she knew she'd crossed a line at the wedding, but pride kept her from admitting it. Madison, still in her bridesmaid dress, sat beside her. "Clara, you were harsh. Julian's your brother. He paid for everything. Did you even thank him?" Clara's silence was answer enough. She'd always seen Julian's success as a kind of betrayal, a way of outshining her. Growing up, she'd been the golden child cheerleader, prom queen, the one everyone adored. Julian, quiet and bookish, had been her shadow. When he came out, it shifted something in their family, and Clara had resented the attention it drew. Now, she was paying the price. Meanwhile, Julian and Ezra returned to Boston, their apartment a haven of color and warmth. Ezra's paintings lined the walls, bursts of emotion in every stroke, while Julian's desk was cluttered with Haven's latest updates. The app was thriving, with a new feature allowing users to connect with local queer communities. Julian threw himself into work, but Clara's words still echoed. He wondered if he'd gone too far, if revenge had made him the monster she'd accused him of being. That evening, Ellen showed up at their door, her face etched with exhaustion. "Julian, we need to talk," she said, stepping inside. Ezra excused himself, giving them space, but his presence lingered in the air, a reminder of Julian's strength. Ellen sat stiffly, her hands clasped. "What you did was cruel." Clara's humiliated. The whole town's talking. Julian's jaw tightened. "And what about what she did to me?" To Ezra. "You were there, Mom. You heard her." Ellen looked away, her silence a confession. She'd always been the peacemaker, smoothing over conflicts without taking sides. But her neutrality had left Julian alone in his battles. "I just wanted to be part of the family," he said, his voice breaking. "I paid for her dream because I thought it would bring us closer. But she made it clear I don't belong." Ellen's eyes softened, but she didn't speak. Julian continued, "I'm done begging for acceptance. I have a Lifia good one. With Ezra. With my work. The Clara can't see that. That's on her. Ellen reached for his hand, but he pulled back. You need to decide. Mom. Are you with me, or are you with her? The question hung heavy. Ellen left without answering, but her hesitation planted a seed of doubt in Julian. Had he burned every bridge? The next day, Clara called, her voice softer than before. Julian, I didn't know you paid for everything. I shouldn't have said those things. Can we talk? He agreed to meet her at a cafe in Portland, a neutral ground. Ezra offered to come, but Julian wanted to face this alone. At the cafe, Clara looked smaller, her confidence stripped away. I was wrong, she said, her eyes red. I was so caught up in my day. I didn't think about you. But what you did, it hurt me. Julian. It hurt Derek. Julian leaned back, studying her. You hurt me first, he said. You made me feel like I was less than nothing. Do you know what that's like? Clara's lip trembled. I didn't mean it. I didn't know how to handle it. Everyone was watching, and I panicked. Her apology was raw, but it wasn't enough not yet. Julian wanted to believe her, but trust was a fragile thing, and she'd shattered it. I need time, he said finally. And I need you to mean it not just because you need my money. Clara flinched, but she nodded. As they parted, Julian felt a flicker of hope, but it was tempered by caution. He'd spent too long chasing her approval to believe in quick fixes. Weeks passed, and Julian threw himself into Haven, launching a campaign to expand its reach to rural areas like Bar Harbor. The work was grueling but fulfilling, a reminder of the impact he could have. Ezra, meanwhile, was preparing for a gallery show, his paintings a celebration of queer resilience. One piece, titled Anchor, depicted two hands clasped against a stormy sea, a tribute to their bond. At the opening, Julian stood proudly beside him, ignoring the whispers from a few Bar Harbor locals who'd made the trip to Boston. Clara's calls became more frequent, each one a step toward reconciliation. She sent a letter, handwritten and tear-stained, apologizing for her words and promising to do better. I want to know you, Julian, she wrote. Not just the brother who fixes things, but the real you. He read it to Ezra, his voice catching. Do you think she means it? He asked. Ezra considered it. She's trying. That's something. But it's up to you to decide what she deserves. Julian nodded, torn between hope and the scars of betrayal. He agreed to meet Clara again, this time at their childhood home in Bar Harbor. The house, with its weathered shingles and creaky porch, was a time capsule of memories, some warm, some painful. Clara greeted him with a tentative hug, her eyes searching his. I've been talking to Mom, she said. She told me about Haven, about what you do. I had no idea, Julian. I was so caught up in my own world. They walked along the shore, the same path they'd taken as kids. Clara admitted her fear of losing her place in their small town, of being judged for Julian's identity. It wasn't about you, she said. It was about me. And I'm sorry. Julian listened, his heart softening but not fully open. I needed you, Clara. When I came out, when I was figuring out who I was. You pulled away. She nodded, tears falling. I know, and I hate that I did. But I want to be better. For you, for Ezra, for us. The conversation wasn't a cure, but it was a start. Julian invited her to visit Boston, to meet Ezra properly, to see the life he'd built. Clara agreed, and for the first time, Julian felt a glimmer of the sister he'd once known. Back in Boston, Derek reached out, his tone less hostile but still guarded. "Clara's been a mess," he said. "She's trying to fix things with you. But what you did, it hit us hard. We're still paying off debts from the wedding." Julian felt a pang of guilt, but he held firm. "I'm sorry you're struggling," he said. "But I'm not a bank. I'm your brother-in-law. If you want a relationship, it starts with respect." Derek's silence spoke volumes. Julian hung up, unsure if Derek would ever come around. But he was done bending to fit their mold. With Ezra by his side, he was building a family that saw him for who he was, not what he could provide. Spring arrived, painting Boston in soft greens and pinks. Julian and Ezra hosted Clara for dinner, a tentative step toward rebuilding. She arrived with a bottle of wine and a nervous smile, her eyes lingering on Ezra's paintings. "These are incredible," she said, her voice genuine. Ezra grinned, pulling her into a conversation about his work. And for the first time, Julian saw his sister try not perfectly, but earnestly. Over dinner, Clara asked about Haven, listening as Julian described its impact. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly, and the words hit harder than he'd expected. They talked late into the night, not erasing the past but laying bricks for a new foundation. When Clara left, she hugged them both, promising to return. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Julian's work with Haven grew, earning him an award from a national queer advocacy group. At the ceremony, Ezra stood beside him, his hand a steady anchor. Clara and Ellen were there too, clapping from the audience, their presence a quiet testament to change. Derek, notably absent, had sent a curt congratulatory text, but Julian didn't mind. He'd stopped needing everyone's approval. As the gala ended, Julian and Ezra stepped outside, the city lights glittering like stars. "You did this," Ezra said, his voice warm. "Not just Haven, but us. You built something real." Julian smiled, pulling him close. The pain of the wedding still lingered, a scar that might never fade, but it no longer defined him. Months later, Clara and Derek renewed their vows in a small backyard ceremony, funded by their own savings. Julian and Ezra were invited, and they went, standing hand in hand as Clara smiled at them, her eyes free of judgment. The moment wasn't grand, but it was Honesta family finding its way back, not through money or obligation, but through love, hard-won and true. Julian looked at Ezra, his heart full. He'd canceled the funding to reclaim his dignity, but what he'd gained was so much more, a life where he was enough, just as he was. The ocean of his past still churned, but he'd found his shore,